I think that David is the son of God, and David represents humanity and the stench of humanity.
The typical student your age buys into something called moral therapeutic deism, which is moral, you set your own morality. What's true for you is true for you. What's true for me is true for me. Moral, therapeutic, God is my therapist, and so God is always there for me when I feel bad. And then deism, which is God is kind of aloof, he's kind of out there.
What's the hardest issue that just it makes it so difficult?
I would say maybe just the unforgivable action of taking another life in combat. It just, well, not just a single life. So let's say we have to maybe call field artillery and they strike a building and it just happen to be casualty. It feels like that's just an internal conflict that might be unforgivable.
Okay, but why are you in the armed forces then? If that's the big issue for you, why are you serving in the armed forces?
So I served in the armed forces, one, because I feel like that was the main call of my life. That's the only thing I've had a desire to do. And then there was also the not only that, but it's more of a family tradition to join the armed forces.
Okay. So I hope that you will question your family traditions the same way I had to. I grew up in a home where Jesus Christ was worshipped by mom and dad, but I couldn't believe in Jesus just because mom and dad did, right? Jesus is not the truth because mom and dad tell me he's the truth. Jesus is not the truth because a church tells me he's the truth. Something is true regardless of who believes in it or who disbelieves in it, because truth is reality. A big battleship was going through the night and it was foggy out. And all of a sudden they saw a signal down the water a bit, and the signal said, alter your course 10 degrees north. And the captain said, no. Tell them to alter their course 10 degrees south. And the signal came back, alter your course 10 degrees north. And the guy said, no, wait a second. Send back the message, alter your course 10 degrees south. I'm a battleship, knowing the fear that would strike into the oncoming boat's captain's heart. And to the shock and amazement of the admiral of that ship, that naval ship, the message came back, alter your course 10 degrees south. I am a lighthouse. See, truth exists separate from what I believe. And if I'm headed towards a rock, a lighthouse, I better alter my course and get in touch with reality. So Jesus Christ made this incredible claim, I am the truth. Regardless of what mom and dad believe, regardless of what the church says, regardless of what your culture says, I am the truth. Now, he's either blowing smoke, he's either a liar, or else he's speaking the truth. And if he's speaking the truth, you and I want to be in touch with reality. And that's why putting your faith in him, if the evidence is he's reliable, is such a wise decision. And you see, I think the evidence of the way Jesus treated people, the evidence of his ethical teaching, the evidence of the way he died, loving and forgiving his enemies who were nailing him to a cross, and the evidence of the way he rose from the dead points to him being trustworthy. That's why for you to put your faith in Christ is not a leap into la-la land, fantasy land, or cultural bias or family bias. No, you're putting your faith in the real Jesus Christ, who is reliable and credible.
Like if I could put my faith in Christ and still have that occupation.
Well, I sure hope so.
That was my roommate.
Oh, you bet. Officers Christian Fellowship is one of the finest Christian fellowships in the United States, and it's all in the Navy and Army and Marines. Officers Christian, yeah, you can be a follower of Christ and serve in the armed forces, absolutely. Because God has instituted government to maintain justice and order in society. That's the primary first reason for government, to protect the innocent from being ripped off and slaughtered. So yes, you can be a follower of Christ, a genuine follower of Christ, and serve in the military, and you'll begin to discover that there are a whole slew of folks in the United States Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, who are deeply committed to Christ.
I grew up Jewish. I didn't find love within that community, and so I kind of just been on my own, researching on my own. So I would consider myself more of like a mystic, than anything else. I believe God's name forever is I am. And I think that Jesus is buried within me. And I think that David is the Son of God, and David represents humanity and the stench of humanity.
The typical student your age buys into something called moral therapeutic deism, which is moral, you set your own morality. What's true for you is true for you. What's true for me is true for me. Moral, therapeutic, God is my therapist, and so God is always there for me when I feel bad. And then deism, which is God is kind of aloof, he's kind of out there. So I think what we're trying to communicate is the typical person your age and below will say in the US, they'll say, that's kind of my definition of God. That's how God has revealed himself to me. And that's not like a selfish thing, but it's more so I want to define God as how I want to define him. And that has primarily been a pushback against church abuse. So I've been hurt in the church, so I want to be spiritual but not religious. And spiritual but not religious basically just means I don't like what's going on with the authority structure in the church. Too many people have misused God in general, and so now let's just go ahead and redefine God in our own terms.
Yeah, so it might be a little bit different. I think there is one core that, like, when you experience it the correct way, you experience it that way, but I think that...
But what's the correct way if it's all our own personal experience? There's no correct way.
You got me.
It wasn't a gotcha moment.
I don't know. I think that I'm very close to God, and I think I experience God, and to me, it's like, yeah, God won't shut up in my life. Like, it's
that's
all
awesome.
around me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't really know. I think it's something you feel, and and maybe that goes back to your point where you say it's so individualized, and maybe that's not the best way. But
did Jesus reveal himself in name as a human being? Did God punch a hole through space and time to reveal himself as a person? It's kind of like Shakespeare and Hamlet. Did Shakespeare write himself into the play as Hamlet? And you could get to know Hamlet. Hamlet's a real person that Shakespeare is trying to reveal to us. Well, is that who Jesus is and was? And if not, if he just said I'm a floating spirit or I'm a mushroom, many people believe Jesus was just a mushroom. Joe Rogan believed that for the longest time. So maybe he was. Or are the Gospels reliable historically? And were the Gospels, like so many of the great literary critics like C.S. Lewis talked about, they are written as nonfiction. If they were written as fiction, you could just say, well, it's written as fiction, make up Jesus, decide whoever Jesus is on your own terms, and it's your own experience. But I think the Gospels as historical documents and Jesus as a historical figure, who 98.9% of scholars believe across our nation was a historical figure, well, if he revealed himself in a certain way and said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to the Father except through me, I think the experience, like you said, is beautiful and very important, but now we have to contend with, well, is that true? Is he really who he said he was as the only way?
There's a lot of symbolism in the Bible, and it goes a lot deeper. Like, for example, you say he was nailed to the cross, right? I believe that, but I also believe maybe there is like a ecstasy around it, like Jesus was being nailed to us, opposed to just being nailed to the cross. That's why Jesus is within us.
Okay, so you believe, though, that there are different genres in the Bible. Apocalyptic literature, historical narrative, poetry, song.
A love story, for sure.
You're going to interpret based off of genre. You're not going to go look at apocalyptic literature and say, oh, this is historical narrative. So when the book of Revelation, for example, talks about this three-headed monster, well, you're not going to look at that and say, oh, there's a three-headed monster running around rampant the Roman Empire. No, there's more metaphor, there's more apocalyptic genre. But then you have Jesus being nailed to a cross. I mean, any historian worth his salt would say, yes, that actually happened. And that's one of the biggest defeaters against my Muslim friends. My Muslim friends would say, no, Jesus did not die on a cross. Well, they're going to have to contend with the history and evidence behind he did die on a cross. So I don't know, that would be my pushback there. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Because if I'm just going to say, oh, it's all a metaphor, well, I better treat all my textbooks that way then. Science, as well as history here at this fine university. But I don't think you would do that, right? Or because you would fail in just about every class if you did.
I will say, I agree that it is historical, even though that's so contradicting. I want to believe,
How is it contradicting?
Because I'm over here saying that it's metaphors and it's symbolism, but I'm also like, it could be historical, so I am contradicting myself, but.
Well, I love that you take Jesus seriously. And the beauty about Christianity is you can get to know a person who claims to be God, who is, we believe is God, actually wanting a personal relationship with us. If you go to Hinduism, for example, there's going to be no personal relationship. There's definitely going to be no grace and forgiveness. And there's definitely not going to be an understanding of sin. There's always just going to be karma, and you messed up, and sorry, if you're dying of cancer right now, it was something you did in your previous life. But I think what Jesus says when it comes to grace and justice, yes, we mess up often, and oftentimes consequences follow, but there's also grace. And so, for me, I would just say, you're going to have to throw out the Bible if you're going to say, we can conceptualize Jesus any old way we want to.
You've always heard that, God's creation, we are God's creation, and all of that. Well, if we are God's creation, why would God create you in a way where then he can turn back to you and say, well, you're sinning. Why are you doing this to me?
Great question. You and I are not robots. We're human beings and created in the image of God, which partially means we have a free will, which means I can pull out my wallet if this guy's hungry. Aren't you so glad you sat here today? Yeah, oh yeah. And I can give him my wallet and tell him go out and get dinner. Or I can take my hand that God has given me, and instead of pulling out money to give it to him, I can roll it into a fist and send it crashing into his handsome face. God makes me do neither, but he will judge me if I choose to roll my hand into a fist and send it crashing into his handsome face, because that is a perversion of the gift of a hand that God gave me, in stark contrast to pulling out of my wallet to give him money because he's hungry. That is good. Smacking him is evil. So God chose to partially limit his power by giving me a free will, which means if I choose to haul back and slam him in the face, he's not going to put plexiglass right here, and my hand is going to reverberate and recoil after I hit the plexiglass. But there's coming a day of judgment when God will hold me responsible for the way I exercise my free will.
It does make sense, because I've heard people tell me, oh, well, we're not, under the total influence of God, and we still have freedom per se. But I just always wondered, so I guess what I'm trying to say is, did he give us that freedom knowing we would sin? And basically, that's basically my question. Or did he expect us to just be completely sinless?
No, he gives us a free will, calls us to be responsible. I've been irresponsible. That is my sin. My sin is, I think I got a better way to be happy. I think I got a better way to live my life than God's way. In other words, God, in spite of the fact that you're all-knowing and all-loving, I got a better way. I think I know what's best for Cliff. And God says, whoa, slow down, Cliff. I'm all-knowing and I'm all-loving. You can trust me. And now I got to make a decision. Am I going to trust God? Or am I going to trust Cliff ultimately to define right and wrong, to define the purpose of my sexuality, to define the purpose of my money? Every area of life. Does God know better than I do, or do I know better than God? In many ways, it just comes down to that simple statement. Do I know better than God, or does God know better than me the best way to be happy, to be fulfilled, to be satisfied in life? And I think, especially when I'm in university, around the tender ages of 18 to 23, that having sex with anybody who wants to have sex with me, consensual sex, is by far the best way to be happy. And Jesus Christ says, no, Cliff, you're wrong. Because when you have sex outside of the context of a lifelong commitment, you're trivializing yourself and you're trivializing your sex partner. And guess what, Cliff? A woman is not just a good-looking pair of legs. A woman is not a 10 or an 8 or a 6 or a 2. No, that is a totally false view of womanhood. A woman is a precious human being created in the image of God, which means you better learn to respect her, Cliff, as a woman, not as a hunk of meat on a hoof.
Another thing I've been thinking about is like, well, in that process, how do you prevent yourself from, falling into a trap of the Bible or the Word of God being weaponized against society? Because we saw it in early European history with the mandate of heaven, and even with the United States with manifest destiny.
Yep.
Like they had a mandate from heaven to do this. When in reality, like, how does that make sense?
Sir, the answer to your question is so simple, but it's very disturbing. I can't answer your question. You got to go do your homework. You got to read the Bible for yourselves, because you're absolutely correct. People are going to use the Bible to weaponize their opinion and to slam you into the ground. And that's tragic. That is evil, it's wrong, but you're right, sir. It's been done for thousands of years. Don't buy into it. Instead, read the Bible for yourself. Ask God to give you wisdom. Apply the scriptures to your life, and don't use it as a weapon, because that has been done, and it's sick and tragic. But remember, nuclear energy has been used to blow Hiroshima and Nagasaki off the map. It doesn't mean that nuclear energy is all bad, just because it's abused. And there's a lot of stuff that's been abused. That doesn't mean it's wrong. Drugs. There's some bad drugs. You can get hooked and become an addict. Or there's some use of good drugs, where a doctor will medicate you and you will be a lot healthier as a result of drugs. So don't get turned off by religious hypocrisy. Reject it. Reject it when people weaponize their faith and use it to justify slamming people in the ground. That's evil, flat out. And Christ attacked those people in the Gospels. You're a delight to talk to. I like the way you think.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it so much.
Wait, just 1 second. Stuart, what do you have to say to this gentleman?
I buttered my bread yesterday, stuck it in the toaster. I could have used that butter knife to have stuck it in my dad, or he could have stuck it in me. Depends where we're at in our relationship. No, but you get my point. I mean, a butter knife is meant to butter bread, and if it's not, then it's being abused for its purpose, as well as Beethoven, very gifted, and if you play Beethoven poorly, doesn't make Beethoven somehow a horrible artist. Just like Jesus Christ. And what I find so interesting is Jesus came with the towel more than any other spiritual leader, not even close. Jesus came with self-sacrifice, not self-assertion. In our culture today, it's about your life for mine. Jesus says it's my life for yours. And that has shaped Judeo-Christian values down through our nation's history. The scary part is that's kind of being taken away. The revival that I see with your guys' generation, fortunately, is bringing it back. But if you remove Judeo-Christian values based off of the spiritual leader who brought the towel, now all of a sudden you're going to see forgiveness disappear. We talked about sin. You're going to see sin disappear. You're going to see commitment. See, to your sexual question earlier, the thing I see in my town that's concerning to me is open marriages and key parties. Been invited before. I said no. And I think that's very important for people to say no. Because some people think it's just spicing up the marriage. No, it's communicating to your children that you could care less about your spouse and commitment. But Jesus Christ came, unlike any other spiritual leader, and said there's something called a covenant that you strike with a spouse where you say, till death do us part. And this is before God. And so you lose the moral bearings of our society when the church loses its moral authority done right through Jesus' teachings and who he was. The church done right was in the Roman Empire, when all the big plagues hit in the 300s and 400s AD, the Christians were the only ones who were leaving the suburban areas, going down into the urban areas, giving up their own lives because they caught the plague themselves, trying to bring others out of the cities to the suburbs to save their lives. Okay, that's what Christ taught, all about sacrifice. So whenever you see any type of abuse in the name of Christ, you just got to call it what it is. But if there wasn't this Jesus Christ who existed, who all of a sudden made it cool to be kind and self-sacrificial, I don't know where we'd be as a society or as a world.
Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning into this episode. Like and hit that subscribe button in order to join the family. Also want to invite you to our church where we pastor at in New Canaan, Connecticut. It's called Grace Community Church. We are currently meeting at a middle school, Sachs Middle School, and we start at 9:30 a.m. Hope to meet you there. See you soon.